I am Megan Selmer. I'm the Outreach Coordinator at the National Network for Equitable Library Service. Thank you so much for joining me today for the NNELS demographic webinar focusing on adults with print disabilities. So as you all know, library staff assist a really diverse group of people, including those with print disabilities, in accessing reading materials that meet their needs and preferences. This webinar will build on reference and readers advisory interviews, focusing on determining which books and resources can support your adults with print disabilities using your library. All the resources and the slides will be available to you after the webinar. I will send it out to your email that you registered with. I will not cover the extensive reading requirements of everyone in this group, of course, but I am here to help if you have any questions. Okay, I'd like to begin by respectfully acknowledge that I live, work, and play on the ancestral, traditional, and unceded territory of the Sililic, Okanagan, and Lekwapem, Cayuse, Umatilla, and Walla Walla peoples. If you would like to respectfully acknowledge where you live, work, and play, please take a moment to do so now. Thank you. Okay. So here is what we're going to cover today. So I'm going to begin with a recap of the Seniors with Print Disability webinar for anyone who didn't attend, and just really to provide some context. I'm going to cover, again, what is a print disability, people with print disabilities in Canada, and then I'll provide personas and scenarios of different library patrons with print disabilities, and we can finish with some question and discussion around what resources and what questions you think might be best for your adult patrons with print disabilities in your library. So the recap of the Seniors with Print Disability website. So first we introduced NNELS. So then we are the National Network for Equitable Library Service, a digital public catalog of accessible books for readers with print disabilities. We provide access to accessible and alternate formats for people with print disabilities across Canada. We then discussed respectful interactions in the last webinar. From that, we recommend you consider the language that you use when asking questions and how you talk to your patrons with disabilities. In practice, we always say asking each person what they prefer is a best practice, but when in doubt, mirror how the individual refers to themselves. And then finally, the Seniors with Print Disability webinar contained personas and scenarios that presented different ways to help seniors new to print disabilities with varying technology skills. And that recording is now available on the NNELS YouTube page. The link's here, but that link will also be in the resources that I hand out at the end of the presentation. So what is a print disability? We did discuss this in the previous webinar, but the personas and the scenarios in this presentation cover each subcategory. So I really wanted to go over them once again really quickly. So from the Copyright Act, a print disability is defined as a disability that prevents or inhibits a person from reading a literary, musical, artistic, or dramatic work in its original format. It includes such a disability resulting from a severe or total impairment of sight, or the inability to focus or move one's eyes, the inability to hold or manipulate a book, or an impairment relating to comprehension. It's important to consider that print disabilities can also be permanent or temporary, visible or invisible, and developed by anyone at any time in their life. Print disabilities encompass a broad range of people with disabilities across Canada. And how broad? So here's the stats from the 2023 Statistics Canada survey, found that 5.2 million Canadians, or roughly 12.5% of the population, indicated that they had difficulty with print material. Of that 12.5%, 77.4% had difficulty seeing words in print, 25% had difficulty holding or turning pages of print material, and 42.2% had difficulty reading or understanding words in print. The results of this survey can definitely be applied to the communities that you serve. So roughly 12.5% of your community has a print disability, and this webinar will help you support them and their reading needs. All right, let's dive in. We're going to go through 4 personas and scenarios representing potential library patrons you may encounter. I've suggested some resources that may be helpful to you or the patron when you're helping provide those library services to them. So first up, we have Miguel Rodriguez. Miguel is a 25-year-old man who recently broke his arm in 3 places in a car accident. This injury has made it painful and challenging for him to manage his usual activities. He enjoys reading, and since he has some spare time while he heals, he decided to visit the library to check out some books. I just want to take a brief second to note here that we will provide images as requested after the last webinar. I'm going to take this as an opportunity to describe the images aloud, as that is the best practice when giving a presentation, so everyone has the same experience of your presentation and slides. So on the right side of the slide, there is an image of a young man with dark hair and a dark beard sitting at a white desk, looking down at his left injured arm in a white sling. His right hand gently holds his injured arm. He is dressed in a blue t-shirt and blue pants. The top of his head and the lower part of his body are cut out of the image. All right, so here's Miguel's scenario. So Miguel visits the library to pick up some books to enjoy at home. He jokes with the librarian that reading might be difficult right now with his broken arm. So leading to that, here are some questions you could ask Miguel when joking about how it might be difficult to hold a book with his arm. You could ask, do you have difficulty holding a print book? If you have trouble holding a print book, that is considered a disability for the time you experience that difficulty. So while your broken arm heals, would you like to sign up for the free services available for individuals with disabilities in Canada? So Miguel has a temporary print disability while his arm heals. And then because he has difficulty holding a print book, let's try and find out what format would work. So would you like to try reading this book in a different format, such as an audiobook or ebook? And then what device he may use to read those. So what devices do you have that you could read on them, like a smartphone, tablet, or computer? So here is a recap of Miguel's scenario in question. Miguel signs the self-declaration form provided by his library to declare that he has a temporary print disability. He will now be able to access NNELS through his library as an electronic resource, like the other resources his library provides while his arm heals. He downloads an ebook and uses his Android tablet to read the book in simply reading it. So we found out exactly what Miguel needs. Here are some great resources to help him. So the first one is for both libraries and Miguel. It's information about print disabilities and the services provided in Canada. So he likely did not know he had a print disability while his arm was healing, but here are places where you can get more information about that. So about NNELS, where we outline what a print disability is and the services that we provide. And then CELA has the same kind of page for what is a print disability and the services they provide for people with print disabilities. And then I wanted to put this final one in here. It's the definition of print disabilities from the Canadian Copyright Act. And this is the official definition that is used by NNELS. And that is because we can provide the content at NNELS and allow users with print disabilities to request titles under a copyright exemption provided by the Canadian Copyright Act in Section 32. So those are some research to teach about print disabilities and the various categories and people included in that group. Next, we have some library resources for signing patrons up for accessible collection services. The first one is the NNELS Info for Libraries training page, which covers information, again, about print disabilities and how to register new users. We also have a sample self-declaration form for any libraries who might not have one or are unsure if they have one that you can take and adapt to your own library. The next one is information for libraries with connectors. So there are 2 ways libraries connect with NNELS, one with connectors and one with user managers. The first, if your library has a connector with NNELS, which is integrated into your ILS system, then once you change their user permissions in your library, they can sign in and access the NNELS collection from the website. For example, if you use Sitka's Evergreen, You would change the patron permissions to PL print disabled, and then they would be able to sign into the NNELS website. The next resource is the NNELS user manager training. If your library does not have a connector, people registering for NNELS accounts from your community will need your help to approve their account application. So we'll email your library or the email that you provided when signing up to be a user manager to determine if this person is eligible for our services. And then finally, CELA has great resources about joining their library as well. So this funnel outlines how to offer CELA at your web library and sign users up for their services. Okay, the last resources from Miguel. These are resources and tutorials for accessing accessible content. So we have reading a book from NNELS. This outlines the formats provided by us and the links to reading system recommendations that are organized by operating system and device type. So you can look up Android and find what reading system would be best for the format he would like to read. We have finding, searching, and downloading books onto your devices in NNELS. And that's how to find, search, and download books to your device. And then CELA has help in getting started pages for their patrons. And then we'll talk a little bit about BANQ later, the Bibliothèque et Archives Nationales du Québec, but that's the Quebec's accessible and alternate format provider. And I just want to be inclusive of all of Canada. So talk about them as a resource as well. All right, well, let's take an opportunity to watch this demonstration by a NNELS accessibility expert on how books are free to read at NNELS for people with print disabilities in Canada, which would be helpful as Miguel learns the services that are available to him.
Hi, I'm Tate. I'm an accessibility tester with NNELS, and today I'd like to tell you about free books. I got this book from the library for free, Canadian History for Dummies. I have about 10% vision, so I can read this book nice and close, like this, when my nose is basically touching the page. This works most of the time, but if I had a little bit less vision, how could I still read these books, just like from the library, for free? Well, this is where NNELS comes in. NNELS provides a free library of digital content, where you can access the same resources that a public library has, but in digital form. You can download these books in your preferred format and read them on any device that works best for you. Visit nels.ca to find out more.
Awesome. Okay. So let's dive into our next persona. This is Michelle Lee. Michelle is a 31-year-old woman with a learning print disability. She has dyslexia and has difficulty reading printed text. She's avoided reading books for fun and the library because of it. So the photo description, a young woman with a light to medium skin tone has brownish red hair that falls to her shoulders, and her head is tilted slightly to the right. She smiles at the camera, showing her teeth. She wears a two-tone dark gray sweater featuring a geometric pattern. Blurred bookcases are visible in the background. And here is Michelle's scenario. Michelle wants to read a book series she saw on social media. So she heads to the library to check its availability. She isn't sure if a print book is the best option for her, so maybe a different format and reading system that the library offers would be a better choice. And here are some questions you could ask Michelle in this scenario. As Michelle is unsure about the format she needs, you could ask, what formats do you prefer for reading? Audiobooks, large prints, ebooks. If she doesn't have a format that she likes to read, you could then ask, are there particular types of formats you struggle to read? Or when you need to read something, what formats do you choose? So for example, if she went to university, when she needed to read, what format would she choose? You could then ask, how do you prefer your text presented when reading? For example, do you like a specific font more? Is there if there's more space between the lines and characters, is it easier to understand? This would let us know what visual adjustments would help Michelle read in a reading system if she prefers an ebook. And then do you have a preferred reading device, a smartphone, tablet, computer, which would narrow down the type of reading systems that would work for her? And then finally, have you used or explored books from accessible and alternate format collections like NNELS and SELA to determine if Michelle knows about the accessibility content available to her in Canada? Here is a recap of Michelle's scenario and questions. Michelle doesn't want to read a physical book and decides an audiobook would be better for her. She needs help figuring out the best reading system that supports audiobooks and her reading preferences that she can play on her Apple computer. All right, here's some resources to help Michelle and library staff. So the first one is information about learning print disabilities. Frequently, learning print disabilities focuses on children. So there's not a lot of adult resources, but there are some great ones. So Dyslexia Canada has resources for adults with dyslexia, which provides information and resources for everyone with dyslexia of all age groups. Made by Dyslexia is a global charity created by people with dyslexia. It offers downloadable resources such as guides for identifying dyslexia in adults and training tutorials for, it's focused generally on like a workplace teachers, but it's definitely applicable to libraries. And SELA is all about reading disabilities, how libraries can support readers with dyslexia. This webinar provides information on the reading needs of individuals. And while it does focus on children with dyslexia for the majority of the webinar, many sections of the webinar are applicable to adults as well. And then we also have information about accessible and alternate formats. So we have the NNELS Understanding Formats. Is a resource that lists all the formats and the features found in NNELS. We have the accessibility glossary of the NNELS website and content, which provides demonstrations on the different formats in NNELS and the reading system features that are most popular. And we have What is an Accessible Book by SELA, which is a YouTube video. This is information about the types of accessible books available through SELA. You could also talk about the accessible and alternate format collections across Canada. So in this case, it would be NNELS, SELA, the Centre for Equitable Library Access, and then Bibliothèque et Archives Nationales du Québec, BANQ, sorry for my pronunciation, which is available in Quebec. Let's also talk about, because she wants to use a audiobook on her Apple computer. Here's information on the reading systems that would work for that setup. So the first one is the NNELS Mac Accessibility Reading System and Apps. So this resource highlights accessible reading apps for the Mac operating system. Each apps section includes the formats it supports, the instructions on how to open and read a book using the app, and the advantages and disadvantages of each app. We also have the NNELS Reading System Recommendations. This is a list of reading systems organized by the device type or platform that NNELS tested and ranked according to 8 key areas of accessibility, like read aloud function, heading navigation, and more. This will help readers choose the right system for them based on the what they need in the 8 key areas of accessibility. And then finally, we have the Accessibility Reading App Report. So NNELS tests reading systems to determine if they are accessible and what accessibility barriers they contain. You can find recent testing results for Hoopla, Beanstack, Tumble Books, and more at the Accessible Reading App Reports. We focus mainly on apps and systems that libraries provide. So it helps you as librarians know what issues might be prevent people from having an equitable experience in the different systems. You could also provide resources that we discussed in Miguel's scenario, such as signing patrons up for accessible collection. If Michelle hasn't been to a library in a long time and she decides to go now, she likely doesn't have a library card, and she might not know that might not know she has a print disability or that she has access to those services. And then also information about print disabilities and services available in Canada. So our next video is from one of the resources that I mentioned in Michelle's section, and it's a demonstration of the Daisy audiobook formats available at NNELS. So Daisy is a specialized format for people with print disability, and it might be one of the options that Michelle decides to go with after talking to her library staff. So let's watch.
Hi, my name is Letitia. I am an accessibility tester at NNELS. I love reading books from NNELS library because the library offers books in multiple formats. One format I often use is Daisy. Daisy simply means Digital Accessibility Information System. This format gives me the same flexibility that readers of regular print enjoy, including navigation by sentences, chapters, sections, and pages. The Daisy format also allows me to either listen to or skip footnotes, sidebars, etc. NNELS Daisy files can be played on any Daisy-supported devices, such as Victor readers, players, mobile devices, and computers. To get a book onto a device, I simply download the file into the app or computer. Then I play it. Now, let's see how simple it can be to play a Daisy file.
How underline to underline.
So here I have a book that I just downloaded from the library, and I'm going to play a random sample.
Enter. How under. Type. How under. Enter. Explorer pane. Unavailable. 9789. Enter. How underline. 9780. Enter. Media player. Pause button.
Prologue. A new door. Midway through the 20th century, two unusual new molecules, organic compounds with a striking family resemblance, exploded upon the West. In time, they would change the course of social, political, and cultural history, as well as the personal histories of the millions of people.
Alt F4.
As you could see, it took me only 2 clicks to play the book. Open the folder, highlight the chapter that I want to listen to, press enter. It's that simple. Reading books in my chosen format enhances my reading experience. Thank you for watching.
Okay, so let's go to our next persona. This is Eric Jackson. Eric Jackson is a 39-year-old man who has been blind since birth because of retinopathy of prematurity, ROP. He enjoys reading braille and is an avid gamer, both video and board games. On the right side of the screen, there's an image of a man with light skin tone, dark brown hair, and a dark brown beard sitting at a library computer desk, reading a hard copy braille book. He wears sunglasses and has over-the-ear headphones plugged into the library computer. He has on a light gray sweater, black pants, and his black jacket rests on the back of a green and chrome chair that he's sitting on. So here's Eric's scenario. Eric has signed up for a library card some time ago, but he rarely visits his local library. He's heard that the library has a 3D printer, so he decides to check it out. While there, he will explore the other accessible materials his library provides. And here's some questions you can ask Eric. So the first questions are about creating a conversation around the accessibility of the makerspace or different areas your library provides. So how can we help you use our makerspace? If the makerspace is in an unusual place in your library, you can ask them if they need your assistance to get there. And then you can provide different options, such as, would you like to follow my voice, or can I offer you an elbow? Will your guide dog follow me, or would you prefer a human guide? If you would like to be assisted to the space in the library. Once you're in the makerspace room, you could ask if they would like a tour of the room. You could ask if they want you to highlight anything with the makerspace. This would be a really great opportunity to know any possible accessibility features or barriers. For example, if the 3D printer has an app, but you're unsure about how accessible it is, or the buttons on the 3D printer are actual buttons, not a touch screen, or vice versa. They're not buttons, it is a touch screen. Or the computer attached to the 3D printer has NVDA, which is a screen reader installed. So a conversation about that. And then do they have any questions about their makerspace device? You might not have those answers, but it'll create that conversation around the accessibility of the room and what you offer. So that was the makerspace questions. Now let's talk about what Eric wants to get from your library. You could ask, what games are you interested in? What device do you use to play video games at home? What features do you need your video games to contain? For example, Eric would likely want video games that work with assistive technologies, or for physical games, braille included on board games, for example. This is quite like the next section. So what formats do you prefer for reading? For example, audiobooks, braille, or ebooks. Once he has specified that he prefers to read braille, as we know from his persona, you could then ask, do you have a braille display or prefer to read braille, hard copy braille? Here's a recap of Eric's scenario and questions. Eric wants to use the 3D printer and makerspace in your library. He would like guidance on how to use the space and to discuss its setup and contents to familiarize himself with it. While at the library, he also plans to explore the video games available for loan and find some braille books to read at home. Both physical and online options work. All right, let's talk about resources to help support Eric. These first ones are resources to help make your library space more accessible. Before I go over them, I want to note that we understand money is a major constraint in creating accessible library spaces, and that is out of your control. So this is just for learning about accessibility in spaces. The first one, Accessible Libraries Learning Path, Building and Spaces. This resource guides library staff in making your buildings and spaces more accessible by considering topics such as general accessibility concepts, legislation requirements, and links to external resources to explore. And one of those external resources is the 7 Principles of Universal Design right below it. This is one of the best resources to remember when making your spaces, products, and communications accessible. It provides really high-level guidelines. For example, is your space inclusive, meaning everyone can use it, or flexible, meaning it can support a wide range of abilities? It's not going to give you detailed, like, you need to add accessible braille to your sign to make it accessible. That's not really what it covers. It's much like a higher level and just considerations when designing or redesigning items to make them universal. And the next one, Making a Makerspace Guidelines for Accessibility and Universal Design. So this is from the University of Washington. It goes through items to consider specifically for your makerspace. Like, are the aisles clear of possible obstructions, or do you provide assistive technology like screen readers to operate with your 3D printer, things like that. So that's a great article to check out. You can note, if you're familiar enough with the 7 Principles of Universal Design, you can see how they are incorporated into that Making a Makerspace, and it's quite interesting. The next one is the Braille Literacy Canada Accessible Signage Guidelines. This is a really great resource for ensuring that your signs are accessible. Accessible signs are really needed for any building or item in your library that has a print sign. This includes bathrooms. Emergency evacuation plans can often be overlooked, and they should be accessible, and instructions on how you might have posted, and any instructions you might have posted in your makerspace. And then these last two are, so the Accessible Libraries Creating Accessible Documents Checklist. This is a checklist that can help you make your makerspace digital instructions, for example, accessible. So if you can't make your physical print signs accessible in your library, or all of them, a really good plan is to have accessible digital versions of them. And so that's what the Creating Accessible Documents Checklist by Accessible Libraries would help with. And then NNELS has an accessible fonts resource that discusses the font preferences of people with low vision and people with learning disabilities in their presentation emails. And for this scenario, more importantly, handouts. And having a large print handout would also be helpful for people with low vision when using your library spaces. So now we talked about the makerspace and making that area accessible. Let's talk about resources to help Eric with the material that he would like to check out. So first up is information about accessible games. Libraries can provide. So the first one, NNELS has an accessible card and board game list that talks about what board games and card games can be made accessible, are accessible, and where to find them. And this includes accessibility kits for really common board games like Candyland or Scattergories can be purchased to make them accessible for everyone. The next one is 10 games with fantastic accessibility features. This is an article about 10 games designed to ensure that anyone can play them and enjoy them. And they might be available at your library, including World of Warcraft. The Last of Us 2 is a really great one. Then we have Leveling the Playing Field, accessible games for all. This resource has games that are considered accessible, as well as the components that ensure the game is accessible for everyone if you're interested in finding that out. This is items like customizable controls, and if they work with assistive technologies like screen readers. And then finally, Can I Play That? CIPT. This website is all about accessibility in gaming. And it has really great game reviews, and the reviews are about the accessibility of the game. And it also has news articles and more. So that's a really good resource if you want to learn about all the accessibility components in the popular games that you provide. They definitely don't have all the games that you provide, but they'll have some. And then here's information about Braille in Canada. So the first one is Braille at NNELS. So here you can learn more about Braille provided by NNELS and the libraries across Canada that host our hard copy Braille collection and is also available through interlibrary loan. We also have NNELS tutorials on how to read books on Braille displays, and that includes the Brilliant, BI40X, the Mantis Q40, and the Q Braille XL. These tutorials all provide instructions on transferring, opening, and reading books from the NNELS catalog on various Braille displays and devices. We have other tutorials for different Braille displays. I just highlighted these three for this demonstration. And we have a great NNELS Braille and tactile demo. This demo talks about the hard copy Braille available at NNELS and the tactile graphics created in them. And we're going to watch that next. And then finally, learn about Braille at Braille Literacy Canada. If you are interested in Canada, in Braille, this is a great resource for libraries. It talks about Braille characters, the type of Braille, how Braille is produced. It also has links to the history of Braille. If you're interested in Braille, this is definitely a good resource to check out. So next up, let's watch one of the resources discussed above, a demonstration by a NNELS accessibility tester on the hard copy Braille and tactile graphics that are available in our hard copy Braille books.
Hi, my name is Kai. I'm an accessibility analyst at NNELS, and I love reading books. I read ebooks, audiobooks, and hard copy Braille books, especially ones with tactile graphics. There's something very visceral about holding a book, feeling and hearing pages rustle as you turn them, and being able to pick up ideas from tactile illustrations. I'm excited that NNELS has a collection of hard copy Braille books via interlibrary loan. Hard copy Braille books can look like this: a thick volume of Braille with a plastic cover and plastic binding. Or like this, a comparatively thinner volume where there's visual images and Braille on the same page. They can come in several volumes and can get quite big, but they make up for their size and how content is presented to the reader. Unlike reading books on a refreshable Braille display, like the one that I'm holding up right now, I don't have to pan the display after every 40 characters and can get a much better sense of formatting where it matters, such as with lit RPG books that have stat tables and poetry books where spaces and lines convey meaning. Additionally, I can seamlessly access diagrams and illustrations in an accessible way with tactile graphics as some titles include them as part of the reading experience. Tactile graphics are images that can be felt with the fingers, as they are made up of raised lines and shading using different textures and patterns. When I look at a graph, diagram, and illustration tactilely, I can precisely determine how each part of an image is related to each other, as well as shapes and sizes of objects in a way that I can't get with words alone. As much as I find textual image descriptions to be useful, they can't convey all the spatial information that a picture can provide. Here are some examples. This one is of a rose with a bud sprouting from the stem and some leaves around it. And you can tell when the area is shaded in, there's a very distinct feel to the image. Below this, again, is the braille, and the braille has a textual image description of what's being shown in the image. Here we have another example, this one a little bit more complicated. This is a map of North America, and there are a lot of areas that are marked on the map using different dots, and there are boundaries that are represented by different types of lines. On the right side is a page of braille that contains a description of the areas and cities and landmarks that are marked on this particular map. Here's another image from the same book. This is a map of Canada, and again, we can see that different lines are used to represent different boundaries. We can tell that different landmarks are marked using dots. There's braille to represent what the landmarks are, and then on the page that's facing it, there's the legend again that describes the letter abbreviations that are used to find different areas on the map. We are proud to offer hard copy braille books that are human transcribed, with some titles offering tactile graphics. To access these titles and more, visit your local public library. And to learn more about NNELS, visit nels.ca.
Was Kai's demonstration of the tactile graphics included in our hard copy braille books, some of our hard copy braille books. Yeah, I love that demonstration. Okay. Next up, our final persona today is Shanna Taylor. Shanna is a 22-year-old woman with cerebral palsy who could not control her muscles to hold a book or turn pages comfortably. She likes to read ebooks or listen to audiobooks on her iPhone, especially books by authors with disabilities. The image description, the picture on the right side of the screen, a young woman with light skin tone and blonde hair that comes down to her chin and bangs is smiling at the camera. She's wearing a pink shirt, squinting her eyes, wearing silver frame glasses and a purple eyeshadow. She crosses her arms, pointing her hands towards the forefront of the picture, which is blurred out. She sits in a black wheelchair with a blurry outdoor scene behind her. And here is Shanna's scenario. So Shanna loves to read, but purchasing books is expensive. She's interested in joining her local library and exploring works by authors with disabilities, but is hesitant after a bad experience at the library in her teens. Shanna's best friend encourages her to give the library another chance. And here are some questions you could ask Shanna in this scenario. You could start with questions. Just how can we help you find the books and materials to meet your reading needs? What do you most often read or wish to read? Books, articles, magazines, audiobooks. Do you currently use assistive technology to access library materials like screen readers or text-to-speech software? Do you have any preferred devices for reading materials? For example, smartphones, tablets, computers? And have you been able to access the books you like to read from a library in the past? If not, what were the barriers? This last question would really help to find out what has prevented Shanna from visiting the library in the past and help her with her library experience moving forward. So a recap of Shanna's scenario and questions. After speaking with library staff, Shanna is ready to sign up for a library card. She fills out the library's self-declaration form, which they record on her library account. She's eager to find ebooks by authors with disabilities to read on her iPhone to see her own experience reflected in the content. She leaves the library feeling much more comfortable than when she arrived. So the first resources that we're going to provide to help Shanna is for library staff. So it's how to respectfully interact with library patrons and learn more about accessibility in general. So the Accessible Libraries Accessibility 101 checklist, this resource is a great intro to accessibility and different disabilities. It also has a section on language and respectful interactions that would be helpful in this situation scenario. We have the Accessible Libraries Accessible Etiquette in the library panel discussion. This, I cannot recommend this panel discussion more. It gathered a group of experts, a librarian, a public service librarian, and people with disabilities to discuss their positive and negative library experiences and how those experiences have been improved, could have been improved. It's just is a really good watch, and I recommend it. And the last one for this section is the Canadian Library Federation Guidelines on Library and Information Services for people with disabilities. This provides general guidelines on how Canadian libraries can provide accessible and inclusive services. It also recommends an ongoing sensitivity training for library staff and just becoming more aware about accessibility, which if you're here, you're already doing it. So that's great. The next resources to help Shanna is to help her find ebooks on how to read ebooks on her iPhone. So the NNELS iOS accessible reading system and apps. This highlights the accessible reading apps for the iOS operating system. Each app section will include the formats it supports, instructions on how to open and read a book using that app, and the advantages and disadvantages of each app. We also have the NNELS Understanding Accessibility features. So NNELS provides information on the accessibility features books in our collection contain to help readers select exactly what they need from the NNELS repository. This is items like for Shanna, navigation. So a table of contents might be really important to her in her ebooks. That is an option that she can then filter our search results by. CELA's how to download an EPUB book to mobile. This tutorial walks CELA users through how to download and open their books on an iPhone. And then finally, Inclusive Publishing Reading Systems Accessibility Support Roundup. This wasn't in the previous scenarios because it's specifically for EPUB titles, and it just gathers together and tested popular reading apps and talks about what's great about them, what might not work for readers. And then finally, so collections of representative content. So the NNELS Disability Perspective Collection is a collection of books about disabilities, including theoretical works and books by individuals with lived experience of a disability, and that's available at NNELS. And then the Accessible Libraries collection of representative content. This resource brings together book lists and collections like the NNELS Disability Perspective Collection of titles by authors with disabilities to help your library find books that are already in their collection by authors with disabilities. Representation, the Accessible Libraries did a study a few years ago that is your public library study, and they found that one of the key themes that people want in their library is representative content. And so I think that's these two resources will help there. The resources that were covered above that would also be helpful to support Shanna include the information about the accessible and alternate format collections available in Canada, and then of course the library information and tutorials on how to sign up for NNELS and other alternate format collections, services, and access that content. Okay, so in summary, print disabilities encompass a broad range of people with disabilities, which is important to remember when interacting with library patrons. Patrons with print disabilities have diverse reading needs. They read different formats on different devices at different skill levels. So there's no one size fits all solution for your library patrons, which is why our questions contain so many, what format do you like? What device do you have? Because that is a really great way on how to narrow down what will work for them. And then also serving people with print disabilities is like any reference or reader's advisory interview. It's a conversation to find the best fit for the person at your desk. No one can ever have all the answers, but one of the best things about working in libraries is the huge network of professionals who can help the resources we can provide, and that is where NNELS can come in. So thank you so much for attending this webinar, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, you can contact support@nels.ca or email me, megan.selmer@bclibraries.coop.